Good evening. I chose my presentation on Robert Frost's Mending Wall, and during this video, I'd like to go over just talk about the poem's meaning, what it means to me, other possible meanings as well. Just some quick background information on Robert Frost and the poem. Talk about the different aspects and context of the poem, and then I just had some further questions at the end I wanted to talk about, but I'm going to go ahead and read it. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen ground swell under it, and spills the upper boulders in the sun, and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair, where they have left not one stone on a stone. But they would not have the rabbit out of hiding, to please the yelping dogs. The gaps, I mean, no one has seen them made or heard them made, but at spring mending time we find them there. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go, to each the boulders that have fallen to each, and some are loaves and some so nearly balls. We have to use a spell to make them balance. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling them. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game, one on a side. It comes to a little more. There where it is, we do not need the wall. He is all pine and I am all apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines, I tell him. He only says, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly, and I'd rather he said it for himself. I see him there bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top in each hand, like an old stone, savage armed. He moves in darkness as it seems to me, not of woods only in the shade of trees. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well. He says again, good fences make good neighbors. First of all, I think there's a lot of meaning in the title itself. Mending wall, just because when you're mending something, you're fixing it, you're healing it, putting it back together. And then a wall is some structural border. So they are healing this wall in a way. My first response to this reading was obviously you have someone, the speaker, who does not like this wall and is beginning to, already has been asking questions of why it exists. And not only why it exists, but why his neighbor doesn't seem to ask the same questions he's asking of why this wall is here and what they're doing. And I think there's a lot to say at the opening line. The speaker opens up, something there is that doesn't love a wall. Again, just further explains there's something in him that does not like this at all. And on the line 11, I thought it was interesting how it said they repair the wall every spring. So they do this at least once a year. And he talks about how the ground swells underneath the wall, causing it to move, and how these gaps in the wall form. No one hears it or sees it. So obviously this is just general repair on the wall. And then you have the hunters he describes coming and messing with it. So they do this at least once a year, and they've done it before. I thought it was interesting how they repair this wall together, which is ironic, and I think that I'll talk about that later. But so they have this wall that needs fixing, and they're going to go fix this thing together. And usually when you do that, when you fix something with somebody, whether it be a problem or a little thing, it is a bonding experience. Usually you're coming together for a common purpose, to mend something, to fix it. So it's very ironic in this poem how they are working together on something that's going to separate them. And not only are they working on it together, but they're also working separately, so they're not really helping each other out. They're both just dealing with their own part of the wall that they're going to have to fix. The speaker even goes on to say he has no use for the wall where the trees are. He mentions how he has the apple trees and his neighbor has the pine trees, and he says, "Hey, my apple trees aren't going to eat your pine trees, so when do we need this wall here?" And that's when his neighbor first uses the line, "Good fences make good neighbors," and that's one of the only two times he speaks, and they both are the same line. So the speaker, you can tell, begins to get agitated towards the end of this poem with his neighbor, wants him to understand and see the same way he does about this wall, and begins to say he wishes he could put this emotion in his head. And that doesn't come across as violent, but more like, I really need this guy to understand. I want for him to see what I see and be curious about this as well. So he's definitely agitated, describes his neighbor as moving in darkness. That's how blind he sees this man. So that's what I think this poem's general meaning is. I think there's a couple different meanings in here, but just to get started, I think that's the main point across the meaning of this poem, or just the analysis of it, that speaker's annoyed the neighbor about this wall that symbolizes something. It's ironic. But just a little bit of background information. Robert Frost's poems were known to be simple to understand and read, but very direct and philosophical in their meaning. And this poem was written in 1914, but Frost said he didn't mean for this poem to be applied, meaning he didn't mean for it to be applied to big aspects in life, such as this time frame, countries beginning to be divided. And he said he did not mean for it to be that way. Talk about tone of the poem. I think tone is easily ironic in the way that they are just fixing this wall again and again that really doesn't have much of a meaning to them, and they're doing it together but separate at the same time, and that's very ironic. And any kind of symbolism in this poem, I think there's probably a couple different symbols here you could bring about. One of them would just be the wall itself and what it means, just division, hardship maybe, just between people getting along. The poem mentions the neighbor never going against his father's teaching, so that could be a symbol in itself, or some kind of other meaning of branching out on your own, thinking for yourself. And the rhythm of the poem is in iambic pentameter. And then just any figurative language in the poem, any similes, metaphors, personification. One example of personification in this poem is, "My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under your pines." Personifying the trees to have human characteristics of eating something. And then I think there's some good imagery in this poem. One of the lines being, "He moves in darkness." I think that's a pretty powerful line. And just to end here, just some further thoughts that I had. How is this poem relatable? I know Frost didn't have it mean for it to be applied in many aspects, maybe just big ones, but I think it's a pretty relatable poem. It says a lot about people and relationships and thinking for yourself. So just, how does this poem relate to you or to real life, people around us? And the last question I had is if you think you are the speaker or the neighbor in this poem. meaning, are you or am I someone who thinks for themselves? Likes to question things like, why am I doing this? What's the point of this? Some people need to know those things for them to continue on with whatever they're doing. And then you have people like the neighbor who don't ask those questions and they don't care. They're very practical. This is the way it needs to be done. It's always been done this way, and this is just what you do. This is how my father did it, and I'm not going to question it. So, and I'm going to end with that question as if you think you are the speaker or the neighbor. And that is it. Thank you.